So there's a ton of financial advice out there online. People are really quick to try to get your hard-earned dollars out of your pocket and into something that's going to benefit them. It's crazy, but almost none of this is telling you what you should be doing first. You see, when I graduated college, I thought I was being pretty responsible because I had already lined up a job. I'd started saving and I was even starting to invest, but one decision that I made early on, it left me nearly unable to pay the next month's rent. And then later, I made a decision that grew so wildly beyond my expectations that I had that it put almost everything in my financial life on hold, okay? And this didn't happen because I picked the wrong ETF or something. I was doing responsible things, but it was just in the wrong order. And that's the trap after college. You see, the same dollar can do so many different things. You can use it to pay off debt. You can build a cash fund. You could capture an employer match, or you could start investing. Maybe you even use it to move out of your own place, okay? Every option, though, it sounds smart at the time, but they can't all be done at first. In the wrong order, it might even look like you're making progress until something just breaks. So I'm going to build the order one decision at a time for you here, beginning with the boring step that I even wanted to skip. And by the end, you're going to know where your next available dollar should go and which attractive opportunity, well, probably needs to wait till later on. Now, bear with me here. Step one, it sounds like it's just so obvious. In fact, so many people don't do this, and it's a trap that I have fallen into. Now, the first step is not opening a brokerage account. It is creating a gap between what you earn and what your life actually costs, okay? If you bring home just $4,000 and your fixed expenses consume almost all of it, well then guess what? Choosing the perfect ETF, that's not gonna solve any real problem. There's no money that you have left available to even compound, and every surprise, you're just bam, swiping it, and it's going on a credit card, okay? Creating more debt, and this is why I think that you need to optimize your most expensive costs, okay? Housing, transportation, and recurring subscription deserve far more attention than pretty much anything else at this time, right? Your phone bill, things like that. One expensive commitment that happens every single month, it also raises the amount of cash that you're gonna need for emergencies and the income that you're eventually going to need to replace and be able to retire later on in life. Now, I learned this almost immediately after college because I spent about a year in an apartment that I really liked. It was in a walkable area, but it was while I was earning just early career salary money, which in fact was not that much. It was one irresponsible purchase that I made. It was an entire lifestyle that consumed most of what I made at that time, okay? And the decision that changed my finances was not really finding a better stock. It was needing to unlock more accessible capital to be able to save, invest, and do different things with. And so the decision that changed my finances, it came down to moving in with family and dramatically reducing housing costs. Now, that's not going to be available for everybody out there, or even desirable for a lot of people, but it is such a leg up if you have a family that's willing to help you out, especially early on, because that's what allowed me to be able to save to actually buy a rental property, okay? The takeaway shouldn't be that you should just move home, right? But it is to identify where the largest commitments are keeping you from having money left at the end of the month. Maybe that's your rent payment. Maybe it's a car payment. Maybe it's consumer debt that you have, or a lifestyle that's built around income that, well, you only really just started earning. So a useful question that I have is, if my next paycheck were smaller than expected, which commitment would I immediately regret that I've been making? And that is probably where your order of operations begins. Now let's talk about step two here, because once you've built up some margin, then the next dollar should really be buying you resilience. And that doesn't mean that you need a perfect 6-month emergency fund before doing anything else. It merely means that you need enough accessible cash that a normal problem isn't going to cause you to go backwards. All right, a car repair, a medical bill, moving costs that come up, maybe a delayed paycheck. It shouldn't automatically become high interest debt for you. You shouldn't be racking up the cards or anything like that. You see, the Federal Reserve's latest household survey found that 63% of adults could cover a hypothetical $400 emergency using cash or its equivalent. 12% though said that they could not pay for the expense by any means whatsoever. And that is why I would suggest building a starter buffer before getting aggressive with investing. For someone starting with very little, the first target might be enough to cover the most likely emergency that could arise in their life. Then I would work towards, roughly 1 month of essential expenses and keep this money really liquid, all right? It should not be in individual stock, in crypto, or anything that might be forced to sell during a decline of the market. And this is also where I personally use something like SoFi, where I keep my emergency funds and savings in a short-term goals, in a high yield savings account. so that the money can earn interest without being exposed to the stock market at all. All right. If you are looking for a place to build that buffer, I'm going to leave my SoFi link, but there's so many high yield savings accounts out there that I would highly recommend, and the rates and offers change for them. So just check the current terms for yourself. You can't really go wrong when you're putting your emergency fund in a high yield savings account. Now, the next thing I want you to take advantage of is free money. And it sounds kind of crazy. You're building a starter cash fund. You've got that away. Maybe you've got like a month of expenses. You can cover an emergency. You want to make sure that you look at what you can get out of your employer, right? A lot of companies have what's known as a 401k match, where your employer is going to match a certain percentage of your income that you're putting into different investments in the 401k, right? So some of them will match up to 5, 6, 7%. If you're investing 5, 6, 7% of the salary that you're taking home, they'll match it. So you're essentially doubling what you're going to be making. And then on top of that, you're compounding that money through investments on the market, which is just insane. Now, I've got a buddy who is telling me that his company, if you opened an HSA and you put $1 in every year, so you put $1 in, say this year, you're going to get free $500 from them. That's company policy. Yours might do something similar, but that's just insane because for $1, you get a $500 return from it. And you can do that year after year. Like, that is freaking nuts as a benefit. Okay, let's talk about step 4 here. And this one is where it kind of sucks, right? Because you think that you're freeing up some money. You've got free money coming in from your work. You've got a little bit of an emergency fund established, but now you're actually getting your money to start to work for you. I would really focus on attacking any high interest debt that you have. And there's no magic number that makes sense that you should be targeting, but I would say that when it comes to high interest debt, you are guaranteed a return on the money that you're paying. So if your credit card bill is say 15% and you can reasonably expect to get 8% from the stock market, well, then you can guarantee you're getting a 15% return by paying off your credit card. Okay. You want to make sure that you aren't holding on to debt that is going to unreasonably outperform the stock market. So like, again, I go back to that 8% number on average. If you're investing in market tracing funds, you can expect a return somewhere around 8% annually. Anything higher than that, I am really aggressively putting any extra money I have at this stage towards that. The other thing is I try to eliminate a lot of the different ways that you could go into debt. Okay. For example, I had the opportunity to buy a new car, but instead I bought outright a used car, saved a bunch of money, and was able to really focus on paying other bills. When I graduated, I was able to eliminate my student loans pretty aggressively when I started making these decisions and not prioritizing adding more debt, but rather just eliminating it. So after you got your high interest debt under control, I would then expand your starter buffer into just a full-on emergency fund. Okay, so step 5, I'd say 3 to 6 months of essential expenses is really common starting range, but this is one area where I think blindly copying a number is a mistake. Someone with a stable 2-income household may need less than a person with a variable income, dependents, an older car, a rental property, or a job that would take months to replace. You see, the Federal Reserve found that 55% of adults had set aside enough money to cover 3 months of expenses in 2025. 30% said that they could not cover 3 months through savings, borrowing, selling assets, or any other method. All right. My own target became much more conservative over time. I initially focused on 3 to 6 months, and today I keep closer to 12 months because, well, I own a duplex. I have multiple forms of income. I have business obligations that I need to make and a lower tolerance for being forced into a bad decision. Okay. And that doesn't mean that everybody needs to have 12 months in cash. It means that your emergency fund should be sized around the risks that you have in your life. And the important distinction is between investing money and your safety money. All right. Investing money can fluctuate because it is time to recover, but safety money exists specifically because you do not know when you're going to need it. So with the foundation in place, I then would move on to prioritizing tax advantage accounts. And this is where I went completely wrong. The first account that I started investing and really building my wealth around was my individual regular taxable brokerage account, which I still kick myself over. It took me years to open up a Roth IRA. I didn't fully understand what an HSA was when it was first offered to me through my employer. And the 401k, I've always kind of got the match for, so at least I was on top of that. Now, those are the 3 accounts though. I would really recommend looking into 401ks, Roth IRAs, and HSAs. I am always maxing the amount that I am going to get for free through my 401k. Right now, I actually don't have a 401k. I work at a startup company. So what I'm doing is I'm maxing out my Roth IRA and maxing out my HSA every single year. The general order of operations people go through on this section would be get your 401k match from your employer. It is completely free money. Max out your Roth IRA, max out your HSA, return to your 401k and try to contribute as much as possible. And then people go into an individual account. Now, I think the sentiment is kind of changing around that, more so because I think people are trying to work towards early retirement. So they're putting a little bit less weight into the 401k. To be honest, I don't really have sort of a big thought around this, only because I don't have a 401k. So it's not that big of a data point for me there. But the point is to understand the accounts before you're choosing the investments. Picking VOO in the wrong account can be less valuable than selecting a reasonable diversified investment inside an account with benefits that you were previously ignoring. Now, after you've taken advantage of those tax advantage accounts, that's where you can have some fun with the flexibility of what just a regular individual brokerage offers you. Now, these are cool because there's not like restrictions. You don't have to wait for a certain age to withdraw. It can help support any goals that you have, like pre-retirement age, and it can be what truly unlocks your ability to retire early. The one thing that I started doing when I started investing in a taxable account that was kind of wrong is that I felt like I was making progress and doing the right thing by picking individual stocks. There was always something to research, always something that I needed to be doing on the market, because learning about an HSA and reading my 401k documents, it didn't feel like anything that was truly productive. But I would say activity that you're making in the market and progress are definitely not the same thing, because the taxable brokerage account should sit on top of the foundation and not really replace it. So for someone starting out, I would keep it extremely simple. I would define your goal. I would choose an appropriate time horizon and use diversified investments where they fit in. I wouldn't necessarily go back and start picking individual stocks. I would have that foundation layer. For me personally, it's VOO. I would trace the market, maybe VXUS, and get some international exposure, but I wouldn't really just go in without understanding the full ins and out of the market to start picking the individual stocks and trying to build from there. That's just what I kind of learned from it, especially when I started getting busier. I stopped looking into the market as much, and some of those investments were not doing as well when I stopped paying attention to it. So I don't know. It's just something to consider. So step 8, at this point, you're doing pretty well. It would be about taking concentrated risks. And only after these pieces are working would I consider larger concentrated opportunities, such as real estate, a business, startup equity, or another major project that you could take on. These can create meaningful wealth for you, but they can also demand cash at the exact moment that you didn't really expect it. You see, I bought a duplex after cutting my costs, my housing costs. I was saving aggressively. The property ultimately became income producing asset for me, and one rented unit kind of comes close to covering the mortgage, but the renovation was far larger than I expected. I was not handy. I underestimated the work, and it took about 2 years of my life. All right. And at that time, it didn't feel like a smart financial decision. It felt like an expensive problem I'd created for myself. It ultimately will pay off. It still hasn't, because I dumped way more money into this. I think it was going to take about 15 years for this bad boy to like actually pay off, which I thought would be so much sooner based on my calculations. But again, I was inexperienced. I didn't know much about it. And so it felt like it was just an expensive problem that I created for myself. Now, the lesson there isn't like, don't go out and buy a duplex. It is that a concentrated opportunity should be funded by a strong foundation and a realistic margin before anything went wrong. Okay. Before buying property, before starting a business, ask what happens if the project costs even twice as much, takes twice as long, and produces no income during that period. That is what saved me. I saved up more than 3 times the expenses. It honestly still nearly wiped me out, and I way underestimated everything that was going on. So you just want to make sure that you are in the best possible place to be able to take any sort of concentrated risks. So again, you dropped me in this world. I was just graduating with very little money. This would be my financial order of operations. First, create margin by controlling the largest recurring expenses. Second, build a starter cash buffer. Third, I would then capture the full employer match if one is available. Fourth, I would eliminate high interest debt. Fifth, expand the emergency fund based on actual risks that you have in your life. Sixth, I would understand and use tax advantage accounts that you qualify for before investing into individual ones. Seventh, I would build the flexible taxable investment engine that you can run. And then eighth, I would use the foundation to pursue larger opportunities such as property, business ownership, or career risks. And this isn't a rule rule that's saying that you can't do more than one thing at one time. I built my emergency fund while I was actually investing. I don't think I would do that again, but you could pay off debt, you can contribute for a match, and you can save during the same month. The order kind of tells you which goals receive the next available dollar and which one should win when your money cannot do everything at once. And that is the part that I wish that I understood after college. Okay, I thought that success came from finding the most optimized investment, when in reality, most of my progress came from lowering my household costs that I had, eliminating debt, building savings, and using better accounts. Then I was able to invest consistently and eventually have enough stability to take much larger risks in life. You don't need to optimize for everything here, but what you need is to do the important things in the right order. And hopefully this video gives you somewhat of a framework for how you could be approaching that stuff and kind of what makes the most sense to come next. So if you are in this stage, maybe you're in your early 20s and you're figuring this stuff out, what step are you on right now? I'd be interested to hear in the comments down below. If you feel like I missed anything, leave a comment as well. Thanks for checking out this video and have a great day.